We are new to conducting a virtual candidate forum during a pandemic, so please bear with us. To provide a better viewing experience, we recommend you select Speaker View in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You can also swap the shared screen with the video for the speaker. Depending on your device, you can do this by clicking on the speaker window or by clicking on the button at the upper right-hand corner of the speaker window. That button should say Swap Shared Screen with Video. We purposely muted all audience members to avoid distractions and also ask that you keep your videos off during the forum. So let's get started. Welcome to a candidate forum featuring candidates for Auburn Union School District. I am Kathy Souza, a member of the League of Women Voters of Placer County and the moderator for today's forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of women and men established to promote political responsibility through informed, active participation in government. The League does not support, oppose, or evaluate political candidates or parties. The format for today's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will make a 2-minute opening statement. Next, the candidates will respond to questions from our audience. The questions will be reviewed by League members. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Finally, the candidates will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. If you would like to submit a question, please use the chat feature and direct your questions to the League member who is labeled Submit Questions. Please address your questions to all candidates. Volunteers will be screening the questions for appropriateness and redundancy. We will pose to the candidates as many questions as time allows. And now I would like to introduce the candidates who are running from Auburn Union School District Board. Jack Woody Hoffman.
Good evening.
Janie Ross.
Good evening.
Sarah Brickler.
Hi, good evening.
And Trevor Rogas.
Hello, good evening.
Welcome, and thank you for agreeing to participate in today's forum. And now we're ready to begin, and we'll start with opening statements, beginning with Mr. Hoffman.
Good evening, and again, thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank the League of Women Voters from Placer County for this opportunity. I was employed by Auburn Union School District as the Director of Finance for 16 years up until my retirement. I have served on the board now for 9 years. This is my 9th year. And I've also served on the board of the Auburn Education Foundation, which raises funds to give grants to teachers where funds aren't available. I've also served in the United States Navy for 4 years. In 1998, I started a community service club at E.B. King, and the intent was to improve community relations with the community so that they would be aware of what the students can do. They had a bad rep, and I wanted to offset that. My goal is to identify and help students that are having problems with the new ways of learning that we're experiencing, to deal with declining enrollment, which has a tremendous budget impact, and an ongoing thing to deal with the COVID crisis, trying to appease all the parents, some who want their students in the classroom and some who want to keep them safe and use distance learning. So we've come up with a hybrid that allows us to appease both ends. And as of Monday, end of school, that was going pretty well. So our goal is to plan, to implement, to monitor, and adapt. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ross.
Hello, my name is Jamie Ross. This is my hometown. I went to school at these schools. I am a Rock Creek graduate, an E.V. Kane graduate, and a Placer High School graduate. I've traveled all over the world to come back to my home and raise my son here. So I want to upkeep those same values that Auburn has upheld since the time I went to school, including honesty, responsibility, just appreciation for our surroundings. So currently I'm obtaining my master's degree in policy and leadership in education over at Mills College. I'm working with some of the most intellectual minds in education. I'm working with the California Department of Education in an initiative to bring teaching artists into the schools, adding a more equitable state for our current school system. I'm also currently working with our wellness centers that are already established in our schools right now. We have Music Mondays over at EVK where we get to kind of just sit back, relax, and talk music, maybe even perform. We've been working with Auburn Elementary on a Signs of Love program, which is bringing community service projects, so connecting that communication between our community and our schools. And my plan is to do just that, connect our community. Right now, we have a C on our overall grading system, and my plan is to really make us a town. We are a town for a reason. So we will excel that in our academics as well. Currently, we have a 32% population Hispanic and Latino, and I want to make sure that they get the proper communication that we need to conclude everything they need to provide higher test scores. So we are here for that.
Thank you. Ms. Brickler.
Hi, I'm Sarah Brickler. I'm a parent of two AUSD students, and one of whom is a first grader who just got to go back to school yesterday, which was so thrilling. And it's really my kids that have prompted me to run. Once they started school, I've gotten really involved in our local school, Alta Vista, which is just a quick walk down the street, which I really appreciate. And I'm trying to learn as much as I can about all of the other school sites, and have been involved with some exciting new efforts to be working across school sites. I volunteer with our PTC. I do some grant writing with them, and have been really excited about the PTC collaboratives that have begun, and it's an opportunity to work across the sites. We recently started a grant writing committee so that we can be better coordinated across school sites as well, and try to be more strategic when we're seeking funds to support our programs. Really quickly, my background: I have a finance degree, and Spanish was my minor. I obtained a master's degree in education in research methods. I became a program evaluator afterward, and then ultimately found myself working in mental health. I worked on statewide projects here in California, including with Placer County, and focused on a student mental health initiative and suicide prevention. And so wellness and mental health are big priorities for me. I am here to serve. In whatever capacity it is, whether it's continuing to write grants or serving on the board, I am here to support public education. I benefited greatly from public education in Yolo County growing up, and just want to do whatever I can to support the schools here. And there's a lot to be proud of here with our educational system.
Thank you. Mr. Rogas.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having us. First and foremost, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum and getting us all together in the same quote-unquote room, right, so that we could talk about these issues that face our district and celebrate some of the great things that our district is already doing, and how we can continue to move those things forward. I got into this race like Sarah because I really believe in public education. I'm a product of public education. I am a public school teacher, and public education is in our blood. I have a third grader at Skyridge, and starting next September, I will have twins that are in kindergarten at Skyridge as well. So we have been in the area and been involved in the public education ever since we moved to Auburn. Previously, we were in Southern California. I got my teaching credential down in Southern California before we moved here. Some of the things that it's important for us to note is that I didn't get into this because I have any specific agenda, because I have something against what the district or the board has done. When Trustee Byer determined that she was not going to rerun, it was really important to me that we get some really involved and engaged parents onto the board. And I think we're assured to get at least one parent onto the board, which I think is a fantastic thing. I also think it's really important that we have a teacher represented on the board as well, and I hope to be able to do that, to be able to speak from experience. I teach third grade up in Meta Vista, just outside of town, and I have had wonderful experiences working with families, working with the district, working with budgets, etc. So I'll bring that to Auburn as well.
Thank you. And now we'll begin our Q&A portion. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. And once again, if you would like to submit a question for our candidates, please use the chat feature and address your questions to the person labeled Submit Questions. For our first question, we'll start with Mr. Hoffman. How would you define the role and responsibilities of a school board member?
Well, they're the ultimate decision makers, but they don't run the district. They monitor the superintendent, who monitors her cabinet, etc. The key, I feel, one of the key roles of a board member is to both communicate what they feel about a subject, but also to hear from the others, because it takes a unanimous vote. And Auburn has been blessed in this category with board members that have agreed over years, going back to 1990 when I first started sitting in board meetings. And that's very important.
Ms. Ross.
Yes. Same question. I believe that the purpose of the board is to be the voice of the people. The board is a direct reflection of our community, of the voices in the community. So we are that conduit between what is going on in the community and what is going on in our schools. Again, these students that we're teaching, these are our future voters. These are our future community members. So it is our job to make sure that they have the resources and the opportunities they need to succeed. So as a board member, it's our job to make sure that we tap into not only the community, the whole ecosystem of schooling, teachers, our amazing staff and personnel who's really making and holding our schools together, especially right now. Our principals are doing everything that they can. Our superintendent, who's really bending over backwards right now to help everybody be heard. So that's our job, is to be that conduit, make it happen.
Ms. Brickler?
Hi. So I've had to do a little bit of research on this because I think oftentimes when you're a parent volunteer, your initial desire is to jump in and try to help with whatever need exists. For example, I had learned that they needed more sight word busters, so I trained to become a sight word buster so I could fill in. But I found that the resources from the CSBA, which is the California School Board Association, have been so helpful just in terms of really giving me a focus around board members are there to set policy, not to get too involved in the operations. Clearly, as an elected official, you are to be accountable to stakeholders, the entire school community and the community at large. And also just the nuance of serving on a board, that you are not speaking as an individual, but as part of a collective voice. I've worked as a staff to boards before, but it's a different role. Thanks.
Mr. Rogas?
Thanks. I think that we're all sort of circling the same thing. I think that the role of the day-to-day staff, be it at the district office and the superintendent's staff and or the site staff, is really to oversee that day-to-day direction that the district is moving in the nitty-gritty, so to speak, right? And the board has the unique ability to be able to look at the 20,000-foot view and think about the long term and strategize how they want to use the resources that are in front of the board and available to the district as a whole, rather than getting involved in the day-to-day execution of that plan. I think it's the board members' role to represent the community, like we've said, and move those policies and those goals forward, and to make sure that those things are being represented correctly and fairly.
Okay, for our next question, we'll begin with Ms. Ross. What do you believe is the biggest issue or challenge in our school district, and what will you do to address it?
I believe right now our biggest challenge is communication. We have teachers that maybe are a little concerned with going back to school right now. We have students that need to be back in school right now. We have differences in cultural. So we have our Spanish and our bilingual students and parents, but we do not have access to a bilingual counselor. So communication right now seems to be our biggest issue, and how I would go about doing that is personally, I've just been listening. I've been doing it. I've been checking in with classrooms. I've been checking in with teachers, planning, whether it's a workshop that we're going into Rock Creek to teach on Monday about dancing and singing, or whether it's the wellness center we're working with in Auburn Elementary. So it's just listening. It's being there and being patient with what's going on.
Ms. Brickler.
Hi, this is pretty, I think there are so many strengths within the school district, but it is difficult still to identify one top issue. I mean, I think just generally the response to COVID, schools everywhere in the world are in a really challenging position of trying to effectively educate while also maintaining public health and moving forward in a safe manner. So one of the issues really is, I would say, student achievement gaps, which existed prior to the pandemic, but are only being exacerbated by the pandemic, and how we shore up the skill sets of our students and try to continue to utilize an equity lens and help those students who really need to catch up. In terms of how to do that, I think strategies like having tutoring, which I know some of that is being offered, programs like Sight Word Busters that help early literacy skills are some strategies that can be utilized.
Mr. Rogas.
Thanks. I think that Jamie and Sarah both bring up really good points, right? That communication and that equity for our non-English speakers is huge. I think that the response to COVID is huge. I agree with all of those points. I think for me, it boils down to our declining enrollment, because I think that the declining enrollment, if we can fix that problem, it can lead to solutions in many other areas, because enrollment is directly tied to funding, right? All schools are funded based on how many students they have. Our district has been declining enrollment for nearly a decade now, and that's something that we need to address. That's pre-COVID. That's things that are issues, and with those solutions, we can start to identify those funds that can go towards those things that Jamie and Sarah have rightly identified are great issues. But I think it starts with that declining enrollment.
Mr. Hoffman.
Well, while declining enrollment continues to be a strong issue, and has been since 1998, what I feel we need to be focused on right now as a result of COVID is, I mentioned it in my opening statement, with this new way of teaching, there are kids that are being lost. And we need to quickly identify who they are and make necessary changes so they don't get too far behind. There are 16 districts in Placer County, and we tend to utilize their successes, but this is new for every single district. So it's a tough one, and I think we need to remain focused on it.
For our next question, we'll begin with Ms. Brickler. If elected to the school board, what will you do to hear parents' concerns?
As a parent, I'm trying to really be thoughtful about how you access parents' concerns, because I certainly have my own experience, and it's very valuable to have that parent perspective, because especially during the pandemic, things have changed. There's been a lot of information coming out. Everyone is doing their best. Really, the whole school community is working so incredibly hard to try to make the best of the situation. But I just wanted to say that I want to be careful at making sure that I'm hearing from all parent perspectives, and finding ways to understand what all of the families in our district are experiencing and how to try to address that. So I really enjoy my opportunities to work with the families at other schools through the PTC collaborative, but I want to do more. I think we need to talk more about how to reach all of our families.
Mr. Rogas.
Thanks. This is obviously a really important thing, and as a teacher, I understand those parent concerns that one person's experience can taint their whole understanding of a district, and I think it's really important to hear those and validate those, and that really starts with access, right? I am an active member of my local PTC at Skyridge, and I make it a point to be out. I've got kids, right? We're all out at the same events. It really starts with that access and that comfort of being able to hear those parent concerns. And I think, to Sarah's point, we need to be mindful of how we react to any given thing, right? Anecdotes aren't statistics, but I think that first and foremost, hearing those concerns has to be tantamount. I mean, it has to be paramount. It has to be where we start with how we do these things, and then what we do with that is up to a board as a whole.
Mr. Hoffman.
Well, I would say accessibility is number one, and our webpage has the email address and phone numbers of all board members. In the past, when I've received calls from parents, I've not only answered them, but I've followed up later to see that their concerns were addressed and they were satisfied with them. A typical example is right now our hybrid model for the new way of teaching, which allows students to be both in the classroom and have distance learning. So we try to respond. The parents' requests are very, very important to the board.
Ms. Ross.
So I have 3 points. My first one, I agree with you on accessibility, and just as we would be on the same page with our children, we need to see where our parents are talking. So does this mean maybe we have to get on Facebook chats? Parents talk to parents. And when things are good or something cool is happening in school, we talk about it with other parents. And when something bad happens, we talk about it with other parents. So first and foremost, our parents are our most reliable source to get our information out. Making sure that they have that access is another point. So when our parents are calling into the district office and they don't speak English and there's no translator, they don't have the access to get the information they need. So we need to provide that. We need to make sure it happens. We've done that with community liaisons. So we've taken, Leticia is our community liaison for E.B. Kane Wellness Center. She has been the direct connection between these families and the school, providing that communication.
For our next question, we'll begin with Mr. Rogas. What do you think is the greatest challenge in our school district regarding special education?
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing, and I think it's heightened by the response to COVID. I think that when we talk about things like the achievement gap and we talk about things like the digital divide, that's incredibly visible when we talk about special ed. We need to talk about how we can get those students back safely, both for the safely for the students and safely for the staff and for the families involved. But those are students that require a great deal of thought and adaptability on everybody's part. And I think that starts with things like we've been talking about before, with that direct family outreach and how we can address those on a one-on-one basis. And that comes with more staff support and more bodies to be able to go out and address those needs one-on-one individually.
Mr. Hoffman?
Well, special education is a real touchy area because we are mandated by the state to take care of these students, and we should. But the state doesn't want to give us the funding for it. And one of the things that we've been working with is CSBA and their power to get the state to recognize that there is mandated costs that gets passed down usually a year or two later. They're trying to get that more current, but finances be what they may, make it tough. But it's an area that we have to remain. We can't allow these students to fall behind. That's the bottom line. And we're doing everything we can to identify them through the procedures, and then coming up with a solution for them.
Ms. Ross?
So there's two things I'd like to say here. Our special education in Auburn, we get to utilize incredible resources. So I've actually worked at Rock Creek in the special education department with Placer County, and I got to work with severely disabled students as well as highly autistic students. And because of the resources available, they were able to have the assistance they needed. And I could see the progress in what was happening in these classrooms at both Alta Vista and Rock Creek. The other thing I'd like to say is that we are mistaking IEPs for ADHD and things of these sorts when it's really trauma. And we're not addressing that mental health issue until recently. I really got to give it up to these mental wellness centers because just recently we started tapping into trauma, and we know trauma affects our academics. We know this, it's proven. So we need to start looking into that rather than our IEPs.
Yeah. Ms. Brickler?
Hi, I just want to share, I know we're big on sharing celebrations, and I wanted to share that my child recently just graduated from his IEP in the last week for speech. He's 6, and so it was really thrilling. We really appreciate the support that we've been given within the school district. And that being said, though, this is a really challenging and nuanced issue because obviously, it's a federal mandate that all students have a free and appropriate, receive a free and appropriate public education. But I know that we want to do it in the most kind of cost-effective and most kind of close to home setting as possible, the lowest level of care that is appropriate for the student. Because, potentially the cost of providing special education services can really can be astronomical and can affect the finances of the district. So trying to find that balance of appropriate care.
For our next question, we'll begin with Mr. Hoffman. What is your experience with inclusion, and what do you think our school district can do to increase inclusive practices?
Well, good question. Identification's number one, and we, like I said earlier, we don't operate as a district unto ourselves. We rely on Placer County Office of Education. Our superintendent might have some other superintendents that she relies on that are knowledgeable in a specific area. So we try to tap into what's already working. We're not afraid to try new things, but once you've identified the areas for full inclusion, you need to move ahead and make sure you've solved that problem.
Ms. Ross?
This is my favorite question. So I actually have the privilege of working with incredible groups in this community. So my Do Independent Theater is actually where we get to learn the Nishinan language. I mean, if we know anything, then we know Nishinan and Maidu were at the forefront of this land before the settlers. So we're replenishing that language. I run a nonprofit called Beats Lyrics Leaders, where I get to work in the schools on music and bring in those teaching artists we were talking about, where they will get trained through the California Department of Education. I'm also the artist resident over in Oak Park, Sacramento, where I get to work with the children, completely different community, and bring those things that I learned, those culturally responsive skills into the classrooms over here and help teach the teachers. I do believe this is something we need to tap into with our community and bringing our community into the classrooms, and hands-on community learning projects are going to make that happen.
Ms. Brickler?
Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. What is your experience with inclusion, and what do you think our school district can do to increase inclusive practices?
Okay. There are a number of best practices that have been identified around inclusion. I believe CSBA has actually put out some resources on it as well. But one example would be representation, making sure that you're looking at the demographics and the makeup of our student population, and seeking and working towards a goal of having staff and teachers that match that and having adequate representation. Jamie and others have brought this up tonight, but language access is quite important, making our families and our community feel welcome as part of our school community, and that they can access the information that they need to be successful. What are other inclusive? Again, my stance has been that when I worked in mental health, we had to work really hard to make sure that the services that we were providing were accessible, not just in language, but also in culture. So I could bring that experience to this project, or to that approach. Thanks.
Mr. Rogas?
Thanks. Yeah, I started my teaching career down in Los Angeles, and like Jamie brought up earlier, we have a 32% Hispanic population in our schools. In Auburn, when I was in Southern California, I was approaching 98, 99% in some of the classrooms that I was in. And, being in the minority there, right, I got a eye-opening experience for what it meant to need inclusive practices as a person who was entering a classroom that didn't speak the language that most of the people in that classroom spoke. And I've brought that into my classroom here, and I've brought that to my school here. And I plan to continue to do those things, like we've said, with language inclusion, like Jamie brought up excellent points about not only our Hispanic population, but also going back into the Native American culture that exists here and the Native American population that is still here.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll begin with Ms. Ross. What can the school district do to attract and retain quality teachers?
First and foremost, it's appreciation. I know our students appreciate our teachers. I know our parents appreciate our teachers, and I know that our district appreciates our teachers. So making sure that we listen to them, hear them out. There are a lot of concerns right now from the teachers union that I keep hearing about, and teachers really don't feel safe entering into this school. And not all, I'm not going to speak for all teachers, but hearing them out and listening to concerns and how can we help. One teacher reached out to me and said, Jamie, I don't feel safe right now. I said, how can I help? She said, can you come in my classroom? Can you just raise the morale? Can we have a dance party? And that's what we'll be doing. We'll be going next week to have dance parties at schools so that we can raise the morale, not just of the students, but within the culture itself, helping those teachers feel validated, appreciated, and heard.
Ms. Brickler.
Hi, this is another one of those issues where there are a lot of facets. I know it's not strictly about salary and compensation, but obviously that's an important piece to attracting and retaining. I often hear that teachers can drive down the hill and easily earn an additional $5,000 a year. And so there's a lot of, there are so many districts surrounding us, so we need to be mindful of that. I actually started pulling the salary data from nearby districts because I'm really interested in understanding this issue further. And I would suspect that the school district has already done some work around a salary survey or having more data. But to Jamie's point, I think this has been a really challenging time for teachers. They are so stretched. They are working harder than they ever have, and they've always worked so hard on behalf of our students. And I think that there's going to be a lot of repair work needed in terms of just really recognizing their role and how they have been so resilient in a pandemic.
Mr. Rogas.
Thanks. This is obviously something that's near and dear to my heart as a teacher. I was endorsed by AUTA, the Auburn teachers, and I spoke with them about this as well. Attracting and retaining is incredibly important, not only because it's good for teachers, but because it's good for kids. Teachers that are happy and satisfied in their job are going to provide a better education without having one foot out the door, one eye down the hill. To Sarah's point, I wish it was only $5,000 more down the hill, but it's probably close to twice that is the reality. And you don't even have to go down the hill. If you've got a single subject credential and you're teaching at E.B. King, you can go across the street to Auburn, the high school, and have that education there and have that salary there. So this is incredibly important. But like Sarah said, it's not just about salary. There's so many more things. One thing I think that we need to do is get this into the LCAP. This is in the LCAP where I teach to attract and retain those high quality teachers, and that's incredibly important.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
This is a sensitive area because Auburn Union financially is not in a real good position. And while in my tenure there, and while the whole time I've been on the board, priority has been, in spite of what others might think, has been to pay the teachers everything we can. And but we've got bond issues that are just coming, are going to be paid up in 2021, that we built 2 schools and the state of California doesn't build schools. So back to the question, teachers need to feel appreciated. I'm very pleased that Superintendent Amber has been just, that's one of her key things in addressing that with the teachers.
For our next question, we'll begin with Ms. Brickler. Assuming you are elected, can you or should you support a board decision that you are not in favor of?
Could you just repeat the question one more time, please?
Sure. Assuming you are elected, can you or should you support a board decision that you are not in favor of?
So I know I was talking earlier about how board members are to speak with a collective voice, but I still think that there's a lot of room for discussion amongst board members, for differing opinions and viewpoints. And I think that it's okay for there to be times where not all board members vote the same way. I'm not sure that I completely understand the question. It seems like it's implying that all board members must vote in lockstep. But I think it just depends on what the issue is, and I can, think independently and ask questions and arrive at a different conclusion and still be able to have a positive working environment with my fellow board members. I think it's really important that we are able to have a dialogue and a discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Rogas.
Thanks. Yeah, I've heard this brought up by numerous people. I understand the desire to have a unanimous board speaking with one voice, and I think that there is certainly a time and a place for standing together shoulder to shoulder, especially on those tough decisions. You want to feel like you have the support of your fellow board members, and I fully appreciate that. But I also agree with Sarah that there's a time and a place to, we are being elected to this board to represent the community and to represent the people that are voting for us. And there's got to be times that we have the ability to disagree with each other and to do so respectfully and to do so thoughtfully while intending to represent the people that voted for us. So yeah, I think we can, and I think we should when it's appropriate.
Mr. Hoffman.
Auburn Union has been very fortunate in having boards that come together. And I don't think it's at all a desire to have unanimous voting, but we do, it's important for a board member to listen and hear what the others have to say, even though it might not be in agreement with them. But usually they come around, and quite frankly, I would not have a problem voting my conscience against something if I felt strongly against it. But I hear what the others have to say, and there's usually some sound reasoning for their opinions. And if you can keep your mind open to what they have to say, it'll work out.
Ms. Ross.
So let me start by saying rules are made for the good of the people, and we are here for the people. I am an advocate for youth voices. I want youth voices to be able to be heard. So I will make sure that I represent that, whether that is a unanimous decision or I'm on my own trying to just prove a voice. May I say, we can prove anything with how we word. So depending on the jargon used can manipulate any language. So we don't unanimously have to vote on something to agree on something. I'm going to start with this quote, and it's, "In a republic, government legislators are a mirror reflecting the moral continuance of their constituents. We are the moral reflection of our people in this community. So therefore, that's what we have to display very respectfully on this board."
For our next question, we'll begin with Mr. Rogas. How can a school district board know if its goals are being accomplished and its policies carried out?
Whoa, that's a where to start. Yeah, I think that first and foremost, it starts from listening to your community. That's where you're going to get your first, most immediate feedback, is listening to your community, by which I mean listening to all your stakeholders, listening to your parents, listening to your teachers, listening to your classified staff. That's going to give you your first immediate feedback. Test scores have to be a part of this, unfortunately. I'm a public school teacher, and I cringe every time we get graded based on test scores as a school, as a teacher, but that's the fact of the matter. And I know that, we are currently sitting at a C-, and so that bears decisions, and that is why we are facing declining enrollment. And so we have to take those types of things into account when we look at whether or not we are being successful in our endeavors.
Mr. Hoffman.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Sure. How can a school district board know if its goals are being accomplished and its policies carried out?
Well, the board should be connected to the parents, but in that area, I think I rely a lot on the superintendent and the cabinet. When we hire a superintendent, we've hired 3 in the last 9 years. And that's not through anything but finding more higher paying jobs elsewhere. The superintendent, once you pick one, you rely on them for the information that you're talking about. And their cabinet, if it's an area outside like maintenance or nutrition, but there's ways of just keeping your ear to the ground and hearing what people have to say.
Ms. Ross?
So I would say first and foremost, looking to the classrooms, the morale and the culture of what's going on in the classrooms, the dedication of the students, the dedication of the parents, of what they can be available for. Classrooms are going to be our first defense if something is working. The second thing is that we have to know what our goals are, right? So in going to the LCAP, we can see what our goals are lined out to be. And it's an easy reflection to know right now in our district, we're 31% proficient in math. We are 42% proficient in writing. So we will see a direct reflection if our test scores are rising, right? So we can see that. We can compare things in our LCAP. We can go to niche.com and check out what our grading system is. And then again, we go in the classrooms. Let's talk to the teachers. How are they feeling? What's the morale like? And that's, to me, the most important aspect is that mental health and morale.
Ms. Brickler?
Hi, when I think about outcomes, I'm thinking about, the very kind of short range. There's been so many great points raised, talking to people in our community. How safe do students feel? What is their experience? What is the experience of the rest of the school community? So that's an important piece, is being able to talk to the community and understand their perspectives. But I also want to look longer range. I know that the district has recently updated its strategic plan, and I hope that there would be an opportunity to kind of check in on those goals. I'm not sure what the structure is for how frequently or what sort of like data is provided to discuss each of the strategic planning goals. But we're also going to want to look at things like test scores, and the much longer range outcomes will be how prepared are our students to be productive members of society, and how we prepare them to be successful in high school and beyond in their careers and lives.
Well, I think we have time for just one more question, and we'll begin with Mr. Hoffman. How would you prevent personal interests or conflicts from influencing board decisions and policies?
Well, that's pretty obvious in our board discussions. And again, I don't want to toot the horns for our board, but we don't run into that much. People stay right with the subject and not their own personal feelings. They may have their influences, but one person can't direct the board. 2 people can't even direct the board. So it's just trying to get clarification when they sound like they're off, and bringing them around generally once they've heard the others. If they're totally out of line and it's a personal opinion, it's going to ring out and we're going to know it.
Ms. Ross?
So for me, it's a matter of displaying passion and making sure that your passion is heard through the board. For me, I'm already in the schools. I'm working with the schools. Last year, we were paid by schools. This year, the difference making it on board is I'm out of the budget. So now I'm donating my in-kind time, which 200 for 60 hours definitely is far from being paid. But the point is, I will be allowed to give my time, as much as my time as I possibly can without exhaustion, to the benefit of these students. My passion is so deep that whatever source I need to be to this community, that I'm going to be. That just means that I provide resources and I provide every connection I can to better and on behalf of this community.
Ms. Brickler?
So in terms of trying to identify and prevent personal interests or conflicts, I think that there's a lot of, this is kind of well established in the field. Just even to become a candidate, you're filling out disclosure forms so that any kind of personal financial interests are known. So I think that there's already kind of a lot of procedures in place for trying to identify if one has a conflict of interest and then making it very public. But yeah, I guess I would say, being a parent in the district, I am really trying, even though we are part of one school community, it's really important to me to work with and be able to effectively represent students and families from all of the schools in the district and not, hold a particular, interest in one school. I'm really here for all students at Auburn Union and want them to be, successful and well-rounded. Thank you.
Mr. Rogas?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. How would you prevent personal interests or conflicts from influencing board decisions and policies?
Thanks. So I think Sarah hit the nail on the head, right? There's a lot of sort of disclosures that get into the financial aspects of these conflicts. I think to Woody's point, right, there's a lot of other opportunities for conflicts in a board that can come along, and those personal conflicts that you inevitably occur, right? And I talked to Daniel Berland with this when he and I spoke, and he used to be the board president there, and he was gracious enough to give me his endorsement. And we talked a great deal about how you need to find that opportunity to listen and listen carefully to not only what people are saying, but what they're feeling, and how to separate your personal beliefs and your personal conflicts from what needs to be done for the good of the whole. And the financial part is the easy part, but it's those personal conflicts that really can be difficult.
And now each candidate will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. We'll begin with Mr. Hoffman.
Well, I enjoy staying connected to my Auburn Union family, and it's been tough, as I mentioned, in the 9 years of replacing 3 superintendents. But through it all, it's been a great experience. Enrollment continues to be a problem, looking for where our leaks are, why we're losing students, and we've been watching for that for quite some time. That's nothing new. Our teachers have done a great job adjusting to the new state rules and health requirements, and I just feel blessed to be a part, and I ask for your vote on November 3rd, the election.
Ms. Ross?
First of all, thank you for taking the time to watch this. I have an invested interest in this community. This is my hometown. I grew up here. I know most of you. If I don't know you, you know my dad. I want my child to have the same experience that I had, which was an incredible experience. Thank goodness I've been endorsed by the CSEA, and just having their endorsement is for me to believe that we're ready for a little bit of change. We're not saying anything is wrong. We're just saying that it's possibly time to open up the idea of allowing more voices to be heard. I'm here to make sure that that happens. We're here to include everyone when we say that we place each child at the heart of every decision. We mean that. I mean that. I feel grateful to have the connections I've had in this community, and I would love to be able to include and use them as a successful output to build this community.
Ms. Brickler?
One issue that I didn't touch on yet tonight that is really important to me is just the financial solvency and viability of the district. There's been several of us who have mentioned declining enrollment, which there are a couple different aspects to that. So overall, there's a statewide trend of declining enrollment just across the board. But particularly in our schools, I think we've found that sometimes we're losing students to nearby school districts. And so it's kind of a twofold. We want to bring those students back and have offerings that will attract them, and also just the test scores. And as we work to improve the district, I think we can get a lot of the students back. But overall, the districts are in a difficult financial position across the board. We're going to be making, I'm hopeful that Prop 15 passes, because without that, living in a pandemic, we are going to be really strapped. And so I think that that's a high priority.
Mr. Rogas?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you again for hosting this, and thanks to those who joined and shared these things. There's two things I want to touch on. I think it's impressive that we haven't even really touched on COVID, because hopefully this is a short-term thing that we can work through, we can get through, and everybody's doing their best. But it has sort of highlighted a couple of things. The social emotional learning of our students is just critical. And that's become really, really prevalent and really, really obvious during COVID. So that's been something that we need to continue to focus on. We've done great work as a district, but we need to continue to focus on that. The other thing I wanted to bring up is something that Sarah was talking about, which is the idea of how we can recapture the students that are leaving our district and are in fact leaving public education. I think we have an opportunity we didn't get a chance to touch on with Alta Vista as a charter school, and how we can look at ways that we can get really creative with our education and capture some of those students back into our district.
Thank you. That concludes our forum. I would like to thank the candidates for participating. You all did a great job. I would also like to thank all the volunteers who have made this forum possible. We hope you found this forum helpful and will help you in your voting. Due to COVID-19, there are a lot of changes to our election process this year. If you are voting by mail, please mail your ballot early. If you are voting in person, please note that our traditional polling places are being replaced with voter service centers located throughout the county. There will also be opportunities for early voting. There are also several drop-box locations available throughout the county. For information on how to vote, where to vote, and when to vote, please visit placerelections.com. That's placerelections.com. Thank you for your participation tonight. Have a good evening.